make this film, which include our producers, James M. Johnson, Toby Hallbrooks, Jay Van Hoy, Lars Knudsen, Cassian Elwes, our actors, Charles Baker, Robert Longstreet, and again, Green Mars. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm going to take some questions from the audience, but I want to start off first myself. Since we're standing here with this whole crew and this cast, starting a film is often a very solitary thing, someone with an idea. Can you talk us through a little bit how the film grew as you started to assemble the people you were going to be working with, both behind the camera and in front of it?
Well, it started off, in a very small fashion, which was just the idea of a guy breaking out of prison. I started, it seemed like a good idea to start writing a script about, and I started doing that, and, I just really felt, I come from a background of just making movies. I don't really try to put a project together in the traditional fashion. I just figure out what means I have available to me, and then I call on James and Toby and be like, let's go make this movie. And we've made movies together for the past 10 years, and they've always been it's worked out well so far. And with this one in particular, before as the script was starting to develop and as it was coming to fruition, as we started to think about maybe time frames we could make this in, people started to pay attention to it in a way that had never happened before. And Jay and Lars read it and became involved, and one thing just led to another, and suddenly we were shooting, and it was a bigger movie than we had intended. It just all happened very, very quickly.
And how about the casting process?
My memory of the casting process was that it was very quick and simple, because we sent the script to the actors that I wanted, and they said yes, and they're here with us right now. And maybe they have a different perspective on that, but that's how I recall it.
Any thoughts?
Well, I can't speak to who he wanted and didn't want, but eventually the script came to me. Rooney was already doing it, and that's what I was told. Which was very appealing, and then I went down and met David, read the script, and immediately liked it, and went down and met David, and knew instantly that I wanted to do it.
It's so weird, the same thing happened to me. I was told that you were doing it. Met David, and
That was the plan all along. Luckily it worked out.
How about we get some from the audience? Right up there.
The music seemed very much so a character in itself. So could you talk about the conversations that you had with your composer?
Absolutely.
For the people in back, it's a question about the music. You're working with the composer.
The composer is a gentleman named Daniel Hart, who grew up with Toby. Toby introduced me to him, and he's someone who is a classically trained violinist who plays in a lot of rock and roll bands. And when I met him, he scored a little bit of my first feature, and then he did all of my short film Pioneer that played here. And he is one of those gentlemen who just, on a psychic level, gets what I want and what the movie needs. And I don't really have to have conversations with him, which is a wonderful thing for someone who's as tongue-tied as I often find myself. And he, came to set, he read the script, he watched the dailies, and as we were starting to edit, he just started to send us music. And I knew that there'd be music in the film, there would be a character in the film, and I'd given him some ideas of instruments that I thought would be appropriate. But beyond that, he just went off on his own and started recording. And he sent us that piece that plays during the first letter writing sequence that had the hand claps in it. And I thought, well, he did it again. I never imagined that it would sound like this. This is exactly what I want. And that's what you always want from any of your collaborators, to be, on that wavelength. And he nailed it.
Questions? Again, up front here.
Toughest scene to shoot and why?
Wait, can you say it again?
Toughest scene to shoot and why?
Toughest scene to shoot. The weird thing about time is that it makes everything you get the rose-colored glasses, so every scene feels like it was a lot of fun to shoot, and it was really easy, but I know that wasn't the case. And I would say that some of the tough scenes to shoot were, involving kittens, because they don't like to pay attention to what you're doing. And And often, like, anytime you're dealing with, like, I really, you know, always am trying to deal with, like, delicate emotional material. I find that it's not, you know, difficult per se, but you are trying so hard to make sure that you're getting, you know, you're treating it accordingly to, you know, you want to have, to give, you know, I'm just mumbling here, but, because it's hard. You're trying to get, like, something very delicate across, and you're trying to handle, like, relationships between characters that's hard to pin down, hard to define, and hard to grasp. And those scenes take a while. It takes time to figure out what it is you're after and how to best represent them on screen. And they're difficult, but they're not difficult in a bad way. They're difficult in a really wonderful, you know, it's a wonderful process of discovery. And it takes time, and luckily we had a team that supported the time we needed to figure out how to, you know, cover some of those scenes. But, you know, anytime you're dealing with emotional material, it is tricky, but I love it. It's really fun.
Now, did you have time to rehearse with the actors before, or did you just all meet up on set?
Yeah, we pretty much all met up on set. You know, there were a couple things that we were able to rehearse, like the material with Casey and Nate Parker. We were able to do some of that stuff, and here and there, you know, based on people's schedules, it was, you know, we were able to run a scene through, you know, the day before maybe, but by and large, it was all once we got onto the set and figuring out what the space was, and just, you know, a lot of times I would really like to be surprised and just see it for the first time as we're rolling.
How about a question from further back? Right there, kind of in the middle.
Okay, I almost forgot what I was gonna say. Beautiful film, wonderful everything. I really like the music as well. I wanted to ask, how did you get from the concept of a man breaking out of prison to the name Ain't These Bodies Saints? And what does it mean?
The title is something that in some ways predates the movie, because I had heard this old folk song and I heard some lyrics from it that then stuck in my head and sort of turned themselves into something else. So when I went back to try to figure out what that song was and what the words were, this wasn't anything it wasn't similar at all. Two of the words were accurate, but the rest were made up. But I really wanted the film to have the feeling of an old folk song and to feel as if it were, you know, something that, you know, Bob Dylan might have sung, or not that he would have written, but he would have covered, you know, and an old piece of Americana, I guess. And I wanted the title to, you know, I feel the titles can often, you know, bleed into the rest of the movie and lend a certain cadence and a certain tone to the entire film. And this was one, you know, a title that I felt did that for this film. And thematically, it also worked because it spoke to the ideas of consequence and to the ideas of the aspiring towards goodness that I feel all the characters are reaching for. But more than that, for me, it really was just that musical sort of cadence that the phrase itself has, and I love that like applying that to this movie created something really special, and I really would, you know, I think we all grew to love it, as, you know, and it's also unique. You're not going to find any other movie that's called this. So that helps too.
How about right here towards the front?
My question is for the director. When you were conceiving the look of the film, what directors or films did you have in mind that you wanted to make it look like?
Yeah, the questions regarding the look of the film and what we wanted it to look like. And there were a few things that we looked at, such as, I mean, you know, we looked at There Will Be Blood, we looked at the work of Harris Savides, who is a master of, you know, using darkness, especially in a film like The Yards, which is an exquisitely dark film. We looked at what Agnes Godard did with Claire Denis, and we also just found this amazing archive of old photos from Texas from like the 30s through the 80s, and we used a lot of that as reference material, and we ultimately wound up using still photography as a reference more than anything else. And it wasn't like a specific photographer. We would just like look around and look through these archives, and Bradford, our cinematographer, and I, we would just kind of distilled the look of the movie into like 5 or 6 key images that we felt represented the color palette and the grain structure and just the overall tone of it. And we always talked about how we wanted the movie to look like an old piece of wood, or to look like we were shooting it through a burlap sack. And, you know, Vilmos Zsigmond did a lot of that with McCabe, Mrs. Miller, and Heaven's Gate. But we looked at things like that, but more than any other film, it was all photography, and we just tried to find images that weren't associated with anything else to really kind of come up with our own visual language.
I have a probably have time for a couple more questions. I don't want to neglect someone all the way in the back there, on the side.
Maybe I missed something, but that seemed to be as much a movie about the pain of someone putting up with someone else suffering for their sin of shooting that guy versus someone breaking out of jail. Did I miss that?
You didn't. You picked up on exactly what the movie's about, which is it's about aftermath and consequence and everything that's associated with that. And I wanted to make a movie where it begins, after all of the events that another movie might be focused on, and just really just delve into and meditate on everything that would normally happen after the credits are rolling.
All right, because you held your hand up through the answer, right there.
I have a question for the actors. What was the kind of atmosphere? I know you guys, like Casey and Rooney, have worked with many other directors. I just want to know what kind of atmosphere the director gave on set, or like how many takes, or anything like that. Is he like a 99 takes guy like Fincher, or was he
Tell them the truth.
He's
I'm watching. I'm listening.
Yeah, I gotta think about that for a second. It was a great atmosphere that always felt like everybody's sort of, if you wanted to do something that wasn't scripted, or you just thought of, or that felt like it was probably a mistake, you were free to do it at any time without any judgment. But the need almost never arose because the script was so good that any time you came to do a scene, it sort of felt like that was exactly what you wanted to do anyway. And but there were some instances where we would, David would have ideas sort of at the last minute, or actors would want to try something that ended up being a mistake anyway, and then it would come back around to where we started. What else? I mean, I don't know, it was funny, Rooney uses the first 3 takes to memorize her lines, so there's always a few takes in those kinds of scenes. But I didn't work with her that much in the series, so...
Those mistakes were so beautiful, and
Right.
a lot of them made
What else? I don't know. One of the things is that sometimes you have an idea as an actor, and then it's something that isn't necessarily planned, and maybe it's good or bad. And then there's some directors that sort of try to convince you to do what they want, the way that they've envisioned it. And then there are some directors who kind of take what you're suggesting and sort of reorient the whole movie around what you're saying, so they can achieve what they wanted anyway. Sort of like changing the context of what of what the scene is to get what they want, and let you do what you want, so that you sort of feel like your ideas are on the line. You're sort of more invested in the performance and the movie, because now you're getting to try something that was an idea that you had, instead of just being told, no, let's do it some other way, which you can always feel, it sort of inhibits the whole creative process. So David is definitely one of those people who sort of finds a way to incorporate everyone's ideas while still keeping, I think, his original vision, and having all those ideas serve the movie in a way. What was your experience, Rooney?
What you just said sort of sounded like manipulation. You think that your idea is good and important, but he's really just...
What I
You just ruined it for me.
I
You just ruined my employ.
if you're, this is an old metaphor I go through, but if you're David says you got to shoot that target, that girl in the yellow shirt, you go I was going to shoot to the left, instead of arguing with you and getting you to shoot the girl in the yellow, he'll just move the girl in the yellow shirt over to where you're shooting, and then it's yeah, that's my idea. So.
Okay. Yeah, that was my experience. Although I'm a little more of a contrarian, so I would have probably found some way to not shoot the girl in the yellow shirt.
All right, well, guys, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. Thank you, all of you.